I think we're going to go ahead and get started with our next session now. So our next speaker is Professor Leng Theng, Director of the Center for Healthy and Sustainable Cities, Wee Kim Wee School of Communication and Information, Nanyang Technological University. Professor Theng will speak to us today about a system prototype called Altmetrics for Research Impact Actuation. Please welcome her.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. And I would like to thank the organizer, it's like giving us the opportunity to present a research work. It's like, so we started looking at Altmetrics about 3 years ago, and it was actually through research funding. So what I would do is to give a brief overview of the project itself, looking at the different work packages, but specifically focusing on, it's like ARIA, which is, scholarly metrics information system prototype, which we think that it will be very useful for universities. Yeah, so Altmetrics. If we actually talk to, researchers in the university, there are not many people know what Altmetrics are. So when we actually, put up the proposal to the National Research Foundation to fund this project, basically there was still a lot of, opinions of what Altmetrics are, and this is actually one of the definition that we that we found as we actually look at the different literature. So Altmetrics is an emergent new research area, interdisciplinary. That was actually 3 years ago, when we actually put this up, and combining bibliometrics, social media, big data systems, systematic visualization to look at the alternate metrics. And in fact, one of the motivations for myself is really to actually look at Altmetrics and see whether it is really valid, because we have problems with traditional metrics. When it comes to bibliometrics, you look at impact factor, you look at citation counts, we are already having questions about the validity and the reliability. And then you have, new metrics coming up. So one of the challenges is actually to look at, alternate metrics to traditional metrics, how reliable they are. And so this is what we set out to do, is to investigate new approaches offered by interactive digital technology and social media. And the whole idea is actually to discover new ways of measuring research outputs. And in this case, we are specifically focusing on scholarly and scientific publishing, right? So ARIA is short form of saying, Altmetrics for research impact actuation. So what we hope to do is actually to come up with something that might be useful for the individual faculty as well as, the university as a whole. Who will benefit? Funding agencies, education and research institutions, policymakers, researchers, as well as perhaps even market tied-ups. When we actually talk to several of the publishers, they are very keen to actually look at some of the things that we are working on, right? So the project is, broken down into several work packages. And in these work packages, we are just trying to explore, some of the the challenges that we face in coming up with new metrics, and having an understanding. It was just having an understanding of what metrics are, right? So in work package 1, we are looking at, traditional metrics, bibliometrics, but specifically looking at 3 broad categories. In the university, we have been facing with this challenge of evaluating research outputs from, different disciplines. So in this project, we have divided, the different disciplines into 3 broad categories, right? You have the, the hard sciences, the non-hard sciences. So I didn't want to use the word soft sciences because actually they are very difficult. As well as innovations and commercialization. How do we measure them? Can we use the same set of metrics? We are struggling with that, and I think it shouldn't be just one number to begin to actually compare scholars from the different disciplines. And then in work package 2, we are looking at some of the softwares, the algorithms that we can actually borrow from computer science, information retrieval, for example. Now, work packages 3 to 5, we were focusing specifically on the 3 broad disciplines and begin to understand what are some of the the characteristics that could be common across the 3 broad areas, but there are also specific characteristics that should actually be used to describe these disciplines. And lastly is looking at some of the relevant findings to be put into a prototype system and to see how we can actually help researchers and universities. Right, so a more detailed breakdown of the different work packages. What then is a novelty? As we actually compare, for traditional metrics, usually we look at things from 3 different levels. You have the journal level, the article level, and also the individual level. Now, in metrics, you're using big data to measure scholarly input, and they come from so many different sources. So for us, when we actually put up the proposal, we were looking at, perhaps we should identify what then are the different scenarios of use, and can we actually take a multidisciplinary approach to understanding these different scenarios of use. And also, whether we can look at some kind of cross-metric validation, traditional versus, odd metrics, and to also come up with a framework to assess, to evaluate, and, and have the system to give us, a proof of concept of what it can be used, to make it relevant. Right? We are a multidisciplinary team. You have faculty and researchers coming from information studies to communication studies to computer engineering, from the library, and we have colleagues from the library here, the research office, also industry partners, as well as we have advisors, to actually help us look at the, the research studies and begin to actually put certain context into and the relevance into these studies. Now, so I would not go through, what we have done over the past 3 years. The project is coming to an end in March next year, but if you're interested, we are very happy to, discuss further, but basically under each of the work packages, we have carried out different types of studies. And these are this slide shows a summary of the different, studies and the contributions. But for this presentation, I would like to focus specifically on work package 6. So as I mentioned, the work package 6 is really drawing upon the different findings that we have, examined from the different, work packages and put into a prototype. And we want to actually look at 2 groups of users. You have the individual users as well as the institution, and in this case, the university. Right. So the main objective is to allow, researchers, universities, research institutes, and policymakers to be able to, compare, some of the research outputs of the individual as well as the aggregate of individuals that could be the school, college, university. Right. We have actually used, several of these sources to help us to come up with a primary data set. And when we begin to look at the artifacts that we are collecting, in this case, a lot will be actually on papers. We started off describing them in metadata, and also downloading the different types of bibliometrics, whether it's publication, Scopus citation count, QS citation count, and so on. And over here, we also have the metrics, as well as, it is actually able to determine whether we can actually download it at certain regular intervals. And, the computation can be aggregated at the school, the research center level, whether it is actually the top 10%, 5%, and so on. So this is actually just a proof of concept. There could be so many different ways in which we can actually represent, the metadata and the metrics, right? In terms of the data extraction, right, we have, gone through all the different, sources, and these are the sources that we actually try to extract, the publications. So starting with a data set, we started collecting data from February this year till September, and it's actually downloaded monthly. In NTU, we have over a few thousand faculty and research staff. So as at January, this is the 4,200 research staff as well as faculty members. And when we actually look at individuals with publications, and in this case, I must say that we are only focusing on Scopus, but it is, as I mentioned, it is actually a proof of concept. So from the 4,000 over, we have 2,600 active faculty and research staff with publications, and we included them. And when we actually downloaded the publications as at September, there are about 86,000, right? We only look at, publications with DOIs, as well as, to do some kind of cleaning up, because it is actually in the university, we are able to reconcile some of the, the inconsistencies, right? So in this case, we actually have the researcher dashboard as well as the institution dashboard. I'll moved on. Yeah. So when it comes to a researcher dashboard, we actually show some of these, different aspects. And with the researcher, perhaps things like, you can actually have journal publications sorted by impact factor. And we actually look at it in terms of quartiles. Now, one of the challenges in the university, as we actually looked at, appraisal and promotion and tenure system, the challenge is actually to say that, this journal is, as good as another journal in another discipline. So, we try to actually put the different journals within the different quartiles. And this is actually taken from SSCI and SCI index, begin to actually look at the, journals, and they are actually ranked, according to the impact factor. Other things that we also have implemented, metric visualizations, where they are actually pulled off from the different metric sources, as well as bibliometric visualizations, and also cross-metric visualizations, and also the map view. Now, these are representations of of the different ways we can actually look at our own, publications. That could be, and this would be actually very useful. As we actually talk to researchers, we actually see that, a lot of us, we have to prepare our publication list, for our appraisal annual appraisal, and also promotion and tenure. You know, so a lot of times, you know, it's like we do not have, you know, it's like a good data source to keep our own publications, and you know, so to be able to see how we are doing in comparison to other colleagues or to other scholars in the same field. Again, you know, so at the institution level, you can actually look at the different types of representations, and it's not exhaustive. It's just an, you know, like an understanding of the different ways that we can actually look at representation. Now, how do we come up with the visualizations, the relationships behind the data? Now, these are findings that we have obtained from the other work packages, and we built into the algorithm the different, you know, like the relationships that are actually represented. Okay, so what I'll do here is to play a video clip to show the demo.
This project investigates new approaches offered by social media to rethink and explore new ways to measure research outputs by comparing traditional metrics with metrics. This is a presentation of ARIA prototype, which is developed using the findings from work packages 2, 3, 4, and 5. ARIA is a tool for visualizing and cross-validating bibliometrics and outmetrics of individual researchers and institutions. The bibliometrics section consists of charts to present the yearly and quarterly counts of the bibliometric indicators. Detailed information about the metrics visualized can be viewed directly from the charts or from the tables. The visualizations from the admin dashboard represent aggregated data of selected entities and can be drilled down to see top researchers of the institution. The altmetrics section includes similar visualizations presenting yearly and monthly altmetric data. The artifacts section is meant to present details and metrics of the different types of research outputs produced by a researcher. Metric counts can in turn be drilled down to view the particulars of the citations. Impact factor percentile tags calculated based on the journal impact factor ranking are placed next to each paper to understand the impact of research under different disciplines. The tree search in the admin artifacts displays the hierarchy of the selected entities in a tree structure, thus helping the user to navigate and find the researcher whose publications he or she would like to view. The Cross-Metric Explorer is a unique feature of ARIA to cross-compare and validate between different metrics of a researcher. At admin level, metrics can be compared between an entity and a researcher, or between two entities. Map view represents the citations of the researcher in the map, highlighting the countries where the citations have come from. Citations from top prestigious QS-ranked universities are also shown in the map view. The corresponding map data is shown in a table, which can be filtered by interacting with the map and also by changing the year-quarter selection. Thank you for watching this video. There are collaborators and co-PIs, and this is our project team.
Yeah, so what we did was we actually did a very quick, pilot study, and, some salient observations, map visualization of the researchers, citations are well received. But what is actually, apparent to, research administrators is that the cross-metric comparison seems to be something that they are very interested to look into. And other things, when it comes to textual versus visual, representation of the data, there seems to be a preference, for, a more graphical, more, visualization, as well as more details. Many of the, the participants will want to actually see more details that actually drill into the, visualization data. Now, for this presentation, because, we have done several of the studies, and we'd like to, if you'd like to actually find out more of the other studies that we have done, we have presented in different conferences and also published in, different journals. So for example, this, we started off looking, at the survey. A survey, responses of researchers, how aware they are of our metrics. And, in this paper, we see that the awareness is still very low. And also, in terms of the usefulness, they can actually be tied very much to the actual usage, which is actually not very high. But, so this is actually one of the studies that we have done. And other studies in Kudos, this is a UK-based company and very interested. And they actually gave us a huge data set. I think it's about 800,000, right, data. And we begin to actually do analysis on the data. One salient, finding is that, they actually, help the, the researchers to publicize their publications through a few of these actions: share, downloads. And we begin to see that there is a certain correlation between, if they were to do the action, that means the publisher were to do the action as, sharing. There is, correlation to, number of downloads. But we are not able to show that after the downloads, people will cite the paper. Right? So I think this is actually, a lot of interesting things that we can actually see. This one at the top here, this is actually very interesting. We actually look at the, the Microsoft data set and begin to actually look at the, the findings. And we actually look at the findings. The papers with QS citations, have more citations and odd metrics. And authors and journals with higher proportions of papers with QS citations have better citation performance. In this study, we also look at across the different disciplines, across the different journals. There are not that many journals with, a social media presence, but I think there is increasingly more. And when you actually have, if publishers have, Twitter or Facebook account that seem to be associated, which is actually very, logical, that they will have higher number of followers on social media. And if social media is actually influencing metrics, then, perhaps there is a relationship, that we can actually do, to help to publicize the work. Now, we'd like to invite you to a workshop that we are organizing on the 26th of January. And this is specifically on odd metrics. We have invited 2 keynote speakers. And, we hope to see you there. And finally, I think, I would like to introduce a research team. And they are all seated, in this table. They have been doing a lot of work because, doing, odd metrics is very, very tedious. They have been downloading papers and doing analysis. I'm going to stop here. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, yeah. Any question? Or maybe you can share with us the challenges that you face too when you actually work on metrics. Yes. Yes.
Are you concerned that using proprietary data sources means that no one else will be able to replicate these metrics internally by choosing to use Scopus and Web and Science as your primary disambiguation sources? Can anyone take it to the next step Could you comment on that and your reliance on those proprietary data sources? The second question is, how meaningful do you think mentioning in social media is to the impact of scholarship, given that by definition most scholarship is expert level intervention, and also by definition most tweets and Facebook mentions are not expert level interventions. So could you comment on those two questions?
Yeah, thank you. These are tough questions. It's like proprietary data sets. We have been trusting them, not only just in metrics, but in bibliometrics. And I think there have been a lot of discussions on how reliable they are. It's like, so if we actually look at, for example, like Scopus, you look at, it's like your SCI, SSCI, your Web of Science. It's like we are all relying on those data sets. Yes, it's like how valid they are is dependent on the source that we have. But if everybody is using the same data set, then it's like you kind of like cancel off in terms of the type of error that we made. The second question, sorry. Oh yes, yeah. So I mentioned my motivation when I started with this project. I actually wanted to invalidate our metrics, but that is my personal view. I was actually very nervous for several of our colleagues, especially in the humanities and the arts. It's like, and also people who are not familiar with it's like metrics. I was actually thinking that because we were looking at appraisal, it's like and also promotion and tenure, it's like already bibliometrics is giving us a lot of problems when you actually try to evaluate faculty, it's like from the different disciplines. And now you have it's like social media coming in. It's like, yes, I don't. In fact, to be honest, from my personal view, I have it's like some reservations on the validity. And that's the reason why I'm so keen to look at cross-metric validation, to see that, it's like, is it really true that, it's like whatever that is commented on social media is nonsensical? But if we are able to see some kind of correlation, then at least we can say, yes, it's like maybe there is some correlation. There could be some correlation, it's like for certain scholarship for certain disciplines. I see our colleagues from, like, for example, like in creative arts, they seldom publish in journals, like, but they could have a good following in terms of social media. Could they actually use that to help to, like present their case on the impact of their work to society? I do not know. I think this is actually where I hope the community and like and many other like metric communities will like try to actually help to do this. The metrics are here. It's like either we use them and understand how to use them appropriately and with care, or we ignore them totally and don't understand like what kind of benefits they can give or what kind of dangers they like provide. And I think we should ask deep questions like what you're asking. Certainly, yes, so I have reservations. But I think in terms of doing research and the science of it is to try to find out what then are some of these reservations. And if these are some reservations, what can we do about them to help to plug the, to address this concern. My background, when I was doing my PhD, it was really on, I started with hypertext and, it's like, and it went into the World Wide Web. In 1995, the World Wide Web was a chaotic mess. It's like, and a lot of research was actually done to help to make it more reliable. And today, this is where it is. And you have similar stories like Wikipedia. It's like when it started, it wasn't something that is reliable. But today, it is still a credible source of resources. So, it's like, maybe we can actually be, it's like as a community to look at some of the pitfalls and the potentials and see how we can address it and make it better.